What's going on, everyone? So today it marks the first weekend where we've had a ton of planetary qualifiers take place for Secrets of Power. In the past, we've had a bunch of minor tournaments, really nothing too conclusive in terms of where the meta is going to situate itself. Are we going to see a bunch of new leaders show up? Are we going to see a bunch of random stuff show up, as the title of the video suggests? Well, guess what? That's what we're here to talk about today. We really only had one tournament that's given us any data whatsoever. So let's dive right in. A huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon, guys. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. But let's talk about the meta. So if you had watched my previous video that I put out maybe like 2 to 3 days ago, or maybe it was yesterday, I actually don't even remember at this point. But I talked about the 3 decks that you're most likely to come up against. Now, here are the leader and base winners so far amongst the tournaments this weekend. There's 12 total events taking place. Mind you that this data only includes planetary sector and regional qualifiers with above 32 players. So we've had Yoda Green, Anakin Green, and Quinlan Red still in the top 3 in terms of wins. Okay. Now, in terms of the leader and base combinations of the top 8, I think that usually gives us a better glimpse as to what the meta actually is. And well, we've got Anakin Data Vault, Han Green, and Kira Data Vaults, and then Yoda Green. If you were to combine the Force version and the non-Force version, he's actually number 3. And, well, the top 3 decks that I put were Yoda, Force, Han Green, and Anakin Green. So, realistically, not a whole lot of surprise there, to be honest. That said, there are a lot of questions surrounding, are we going to see anything crazy happen? Are we going to see the lists that are going to surprise us? And that's where we see down here. Are we seeing new leaders show up? Are we going to see, at least a decent showing? Or are they just going to be a bunch of one-ofs? So we've got a Fasma Green actually taking down a PQ, which is crazy because we've not seen Fasma take down. I don't think a Fasma has taken down a PQ that I know of since the release of Fasma. We've got things like Sly and Moore taking down a planetary qualifier. We've got Sabé coming in with multiple variants of her decks taking some wins. Chancellor Palpatine, Daedra, both taking some wins. So we are seeing a sprinkling of other set 6 decks. Here's the thing. Even though these planetary qualifiers are a little bit more competitive, they're still not on a huge scale. And what's also important to note is that this is, as we've said, one of the first weekends where we really got to see a bunch of people bringing in their set 6 decks. So they're trying to win with their set 6 leaders, but not a single one of them reaches anywhere near the top 10 lists. So one of the biggest criticisms of Secrets of Power is that the leaders and the overall power level is pretty low, and I would, kind of tend to agree with that. Now, there are some very powerful cards outside of the leaders. Chancellor Palpatine, like I mentioned, is just kind of a worse version of the kind of the mid-range options that you have and the control options that you have. So like Kira Data Vault is like the quintessential Vigilance Villainy command. And you even have Director Krennic coming in and winning kind of equivalent to Chancellor Palpatine. Daedra Blue, a little bit more controlling than we've seen in the past, but, well, at least performing somewhat reasonably. And a lot of these one-ofs here, well, you never know with these ones. To be honest, the one-of decks, you're going to find that they're going to top 8 randomly throughout the period, and they're going to be okay. They're not going to be terrible lists or anything like that, but they're not going to be any sort of meta conclusion. But I do want to talk about a few of them, including the Phasma list today, as they are exciting and they are fun to kind of go over. However, before we do, the meta has absolutely shifted towards a more mid-range focus. The most aggressive of the options here, even though there is Sabine Green here, I actually think Han Green is a little bit more aggressive than Sabine, or can be a little bit more aggressive than Sabine in a lot of cases, with a very early Millennium Falcon plus Chewbacca deploy, giving you access to a ton of damage as early as turn 2, 7 damage on turn 2. Sabine is still up there. We've got a bunch of Han 2 lists. If you were to combine all of the Han 2s, you could see they're actually 12 in the top 8, tied with Yoda. Very, very different versions. We've got the Han Blue Force that we were used to, the more mid-range Han Data Vault, and the more aggressive Han ECL that people were trying out. We've got Piett Red coming in with the new things like Fulminatrix and Gonk Power Droid doing some work. And we've got Han 4s really leveraging their resources in sudden ferocity. So there is a little bit more of variety in terms of the different types of decks that people are playing with each individual leader. And this is probably as close as we've gotten to like a straight up mid-range format that FFG is really looking for. You play a card, I play a card. You play a card, I play a card. Instead of, and I'll attack you with my units. Instead of, I kill your unit, ramp, I kill your unit, and I win the game, wipe the board. Or, I just ignore all your units and I just hit your base. Anakin Green is like the perfect example of this. His action literally is to promote unit combat and just to play units. Han Green is a little bit more, unfair, certainly, as getting extra resources is always a little bit more unfair. But even this, there is, I play a unit, I upgrade that unit, I go in and get some damage in, and I use those resources to play a bunch of units and I just get in some damage. It's not really the disruptive absolute nightmare that like double yellow Han used to be. And even Han or Kira Data Vault, which usually is a little bit more over the top than the Anakins or Han Greens, you do have Mauls and Darth Vaders and oftentimes Reinforcement Walkers or Avengers, but you're not oftentimes running super laser blasts and full-on control strategies like you were in the past, even though you do have those options. And in some cases, you can run that in your sideboard, and it is certainly more controlling than the other two. It's definitely more of a mid-range, what I would consider fair game that FFG is really looking for. So that's where we find the meta to be. But let's dive into some of these lists and see what people are cooking up. To start us off, we've got the Chancellor Palpatine Data Vault decks that people are quite enjoying. There are a few new additions, and of course, we are heavily leaning towards the plot mechanic with cards like Cad Bane, Jar Jar, Chancellor Palpatine, Dogmatic Shock Squad. We've even got cards like First Light in here, and Sly Moore as the unit variant. And yes, these are kind of what Palpatine's searching for. Honestly, the strongest part about Palpatine in my eyes is the one resource to draw a card in this style of deck, because you are playing a lot of removal options like Power of the Dark Side. You've got Vigilance in the deck. You're playing No Glory. You're playing Condemn. You're playing Super Laser Blasts and Rivals Fall. You are playing a control deck, and you are winning using Avengers and Snokes and that type of card. The value comes in, I can draw a bunch of cards. I've got a 33 HP base, and when I do flip Palpatine, I can win the game very quickly because I can really leverage all the additional resources that I have, as well as having a 6/8 to deploy leader. I think that's the strongest thing about Palpatine that people don't really mention. Like, yes, it works with plot. Yes, you can, draw cards, which, like I said, is what I think is the strongest one. But the stat line on Palpatine is super underrated. That oftentimes, that's the thing that I am most impressed with Palpatine. And just getting in and hitting people for 6 can win you the game. There's a couple of other interesting cards in here, like Emergency Powers coming in and dumping all your experience on a unit. We've got cards like Daedra or Lando Calrissian, which are interesting to see. I've been kind of impressed with Lando Calrissian. Very, very nice way to heal up. But this is kind of the same Palpatine list that basically everyone's experimented with. You've got different numbers of controlling cards, different numbers of payoffs, different numbers of plot cards. But for the most part, the exact same strategy applies to them all. Next up, we've got Piett Red, which really, like I mentioned, had 2 new additions. The first one being the Fulminatrix, and the second one being the Gonk Power Droid. Now, this one is also playing Imperial Dark Trooper, and I've seen most of them play this since you do have a subtle droid focus. Now, with Imperial Dark Trooper and the Gonk Power Droid, your Invisible Hand has 2 units that you kind of wanted to play in your deck already, and you can hit off the Invisible Hand. Whereas before, a lot of the droids you were playing are like, I guess it's okay, like the series officer is an example. Not terrible, and you can be very aggressive in this deck, but you'd rather have the Imperial Dark Trooper in most cases. So this one, really, really straightforward. You ramp, you play big capital ships, and you oftentimes just win the game. It's surprisingly very damaging. Like, you can be a very aggressive player with this deck with planetary bombardments. You know, you get a Ruthless Raider down very, very early, right? Your turn 5, you're able to play, or turn 4, you're able to play your Ruthless Raider. And then, and that's if you haven't ramped, because if you have ramped on like turn 2, turn 3, you're getting Ruthless Raider down. And then the following turn, you can just straight up play Devastators, right? Follow that up with a Planetary Bombardment, and you've at least done 6 damage to a base with the Devastator plus Ruthless Raider if you want to, plus another 12 damage to the base, which is insane. That is 18 damage to a base without any attacks whatsoever. And that can be very, very powerful. Having another capital ship that's a huge payoff in Fulminatrix can be very good, ends the game very quickly, and just overall that starts knocking out units like no other. And of course, Turbo Laser Salvo can be a nice board wipe. Really, not too many new additions, just that we've gotten a couple of early droids and another payoff that have kind of fit in perfectly with what Piett Red was already doing. Another one here that I thought I would mention, because I've been playing a lot of decks like this. I actually probably have a video out soon with an IG version of this, but this is Wat Tambor Red. I have played a few Wat Tambor decks, but this is a new one that has actually taken down a planetary qualifier. Of course, the kind of game plan with Wat Tambor is you get the value from your units dying. You have a lot of these random units that kind of just happen to get Sentinel, like Bunker Defender or Corrupt Politician, which is actually pretty nice. And then you've got a bunch of early plays. You've got cards like ISB Shuttle, which actually, you know, get a little bit extra value if your units do die. You got a lot of random, like, decent removal, like Daring Raid, Tarkin Town, Force Choke. You've got Bounty Hunter's Quarry to kind of pump out a bunch of really strong units. Kino Loy giving a ton of extra power to himself with all your exhaust units. And like I said, you've got some new units like Chancellor Palpatine, Corrupt Politician, those types of cards. And you can put on a ton of damage with your opponent, right? You going wide with a lot of units, your opponent's oftentimes going to kill a lot of them anyway. So just getting extra 2 damage in because your opponent's doing already what they wanted to do is actually really good for you. So I wanted to just showcase this one because I thought it was pretty interesting. And I do like the mauls for the top end as ambushing targets to, you know, kind of close out the game in those weird scenarios. So I think that's a nice addition. Next up, we've got Sabé taking down a win. Now, there's 2 versions of Sabé. There's Sabé Red and Sabé Yellow. Sabé Yellow is pretty similar to the ones that I've played on the channel. So I was just going to talk about the Sabé Red, which is also relatively similar, except you do get the Cassians. You do get Daring Raid. You do get an extra 1-drop. This one's much more low to the ground. You're playing like BD1s and A-Wings and Cartel Turncoats and Soldier of the 501st. You also get Sudden Ferocity, which I think is a very, very good card in a lot of these more aggressive decks. I actually do like Ebon Hawk as an addition. You know, Ebon Hawk attacking as a 5-powered unit is pretty obnoxious, to be honest. So I do think that is something that, you know, a lot of decks can take advantage of. I think Sanctuary Shuttle also is a pretty key card in this. But in terms of new cards, you've got your Faith in Your Friends. You've got the Cicatro Vizago. You've got the Ebon Hawk, Sudden Ferocity, all as brand new additions, and all of them kind of serve their purpose. I do think Stolen Starpath unit up against certain decks is pretty devastating, and we see that in the sideboard here with 2 copies, and we also see some copies of the Wrong Ride in the sideboard, which I do think is very, very intriguing. Again, definitely against certain decks, getting those 2 cards in can be huge. Sabé, we've seen a little bit of her, probably the most alongside Padme played set 6 leader in the previous versions of the tournaments that we've seen so far, but another one that we can kind of take a look at as we're diving into some of the one-of win lists. Next up, we've got Daedra Blue. A lot of people have been curious about this one. Like I said, this one is like your horde control list. Honestly, this out of any list reminds me the most of Vader Blue for those of you that were playing in set 1. That was the deck that I had built in paper, and this feels very similar to that. I mean, you've got a lot of the same cards actually because set 1 was so stacked. But you know, you're winning with Emperor Palpatine's Avengers, and you even have like the restock Bounty Hunter crew that, you know, helped you kind of stay in the game in those really, really long matchups. And guess what? You've still got Open Fire, Entrenched, Power the Dark Side, Vigilance, Takedown, Super Laser Blast. All of those are from set 1. Of course, you got a couple set 2 editions. So if you're talking about Vader Blue from set 2, it feels even more similar because you still got Fel the Dragons, Daring Raids, Tex, the Clients, Snokes. This is literally like a copy and paste list from set 2 Vader Blue, even the pillages, with the addition of No Glory, Knowledge and Defense, Condemn, and Let's Call It War. Those are the only new additions from the most recent set. And you can kind of just see how truly powerful the controlling options are. The strength of Daedra is that you're able to draw a lot of cards. 2 damage is quite a bit for 1 resource. If you do happen to draw a card, great. And then what's most important about this is that Daedra comes down alongside the extra cards that you're able to draw so early that you're able to maintain parity in the board and not just get completely overwhelmed. One of the biggest differences with the Vader Blue deck that I was just talking about is that Vader came down on 7 resources. So yes, it was an equalizer, but you had to get to 7 resources. And Vader Blue did not have any ramps similar to Daedra. So Daedra's strength is the fact that you can deploy so early to knock out a couple of units while you're deploying all your controlling cards. And guess what? That's totally okay because you'll eventually get to your Super Laser Blast. You'll eventually get to your big heavy hitters. And you'll eventually go ahead and, be able to remove all your opponent's units and just get immense value with the Palpatine's Avengers and Snokes that are going to come down. So yes, this is probably the most obnoxious list on the entire sheet, just the ultimate control list that I'm curious to see will even exist. And lastly, the title of the video, we've got Fasma Green. And this one is really interesting. Shout out to the person who actually created this list. I recognize the name as someone who also, makes a few videos here and there. So awesome stuff from this player. And I think the most interesting adaptation is no ECL. I agree with this. It's something that I always put in my decks when I'm recording videos because I think it's fun. And I think ECLing out Fasma and Kylo Ren just ends up being some of those disgusting things you could possibly do. But I think in this meta, and a lot of metas in general over the past, few sets, you've wanted to go up to 30 HP because there are some decks that can just do so much damage so quickly that the 5 HP really matters. And while yes, you can ECL out Phasma and things like that to kill off units, etc. You also have cards like Timely Intervention and some ramp that you can get those out on 6 to 7 resources. Not that big of a deal. And to be honest, Phasma's strong to the point where as a leader herself with like FN Trooper Corps, you can actually pick off a lot of units. And you don't actually need to have ECL to win on the ground, right? Because your units are actually really sized well. Early game, you got your Prides, which can deal a lot of damage. You've got cards like Knight of Ren, Imperial Dark Trooper. These are just good steady units at the beginning of the game. And then you ramp, right? And then you get access to cards like Kylo Ren, FN Trooper Corps onto Phasma with the experience token. And then you finish out the game with Devastators and Ruthless Raiders. I think the no ECL is, again, the most interesting part about this list. But I do think it makes a lot of sense. And every single time I've played Phasma, I've kind of came to the same conclusion, but I just couldn't bring myself to not play ECL in the videos because it's just too much fun. So not that I would be bringing Phasma to a planetary qualifier. That's another page of audaciousness. But as you can see, it was one of the bigger size planetary qualifiers. So it wasn't like, oh, this is like a 20 player, 30 player type of deal. No, this is the biggest planetary qualifier of the weekend with the exception of the one in Namur. Apologies if I'm butchering this name. And then, of course, we had some limited planetary qualifiers, which I am very intrigued with. You can see here, we don't have actually the results from that. But I really liked seeing, all of the planetary qualifiers for limited. This is by far the ones I would be most interested in participating in, just because of how limited works, the deck building options, kind of the skill in drafting and the skill in going through and building your deck is something that I really, really have grown to love over the course of time, especially when I played a lot more Magic. So very, very cool. And I would love to enter into a limited planetary qualifier. But that's kind of what we're seeing with the meta. We are seeing a bunch of these one-ofs pop up. We are seeing a few set 6 leaders get a shot at the meta. But at the end of the day, the meta comes down to really these decks. Anakin Green, Han Green, Kira Green, all 3, and Yoda Green. All 3, Han 1 and Han 2, by the way, all 5, if you want to consider all these 5, okay? All no surprises, like not a single one. We all were talking about these lists, and then of course Sabine being near the top, also not a surprise. Piett Red had been pretty well improved. Han 4 also well improved, and all of these have made the top 10. So all of which are 0 surprises, to be honest. The meta has been pretty predictable this time. It was interesting to see and that's really because set 6 didn't add a whole lot of crazy things in the works of things, right? Like Han Green and Kira Green were both decks that were really doing well at the end of set 5 as well. Like if I were to pull up meta from set 5, let's go take a look actually. Oh, look at that. Han Green, Kira Data Vault, Sabine Green. Yep, all of those. We had Yoda Force, we had Han 2s still in conjunction, right? Between the two of them. So really, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of shift from that to the new meta. However, Anakin doing extremely well, Anakin Green specifically doing extremely well, was kind of a new addition to the whole grouping. But everything else is pretty much kind of in line with what we were seeing for the most part. Just a little bit more shift towards mid-range and a little bit more shift towards command. I mean, if you're looking at the decks here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 out of the top 10 lists are all running command decks, and that's because ramp is pretty good in a mid-range format. And not only that, but also Data Vault is also pretty exceptional, as 3 of those 8 are running Data Vault, and then of course 2 of those 8 are running ECL, 2 of which bases that are considered some of the best bases in the entire game. So pretty interesting stuff. I am very interested to see where we're going to end up next set. Because if we just count here, guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 1, these are the same. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of our top 10 leaders, which if you count Han twice, like Han 2 twice, that is 8, and same with Yoda, right? So like 8 of our top 10 lists are all leaders that are rotating out. That's crazy. And if you were to look at like just like the leaders played, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 leaders, even in the top. Like if you're combined all of their decks together in one, 8 of the top 10 leaders over here. Palpatine, Rey, Sabine, all gone. And if you were to expand that even further, there's a lot more that are going to be gone as well. So set 7 is going to bring some crazy stuff, some absolutely insane stuff to the game, and I am very excited to see what happens there. Thanks for watching, everyone. Let me know what you think. Fun to see Phasma on the list of winners, Sabé too, but Phasma, I've got a soft spot, okay? I got a soft spot for Phasma. It's a fun deck. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Let me know what you're having fun with, or if there's any set 6 leaders that you really wish you had seen up on this list. And I'll see you all for the next one.